Do a little arranging here. How many of you today are wearing a piece of jewelry made out of metal? Be it your wedding band, your dangly earrings, your favorite pocket watch. Now, how many of you today are familiar with the techniques that were used to make this piece of metal? Did it start as a piece of silver that someone heated, used a hammer saw, soldered? Is there stone set in the metal? Was it inlaid? Fellow Toastmasters and welcome guests, today I would like to introduce to you a basic demonstration of my favorite technique called lost wax investment casting. In this process, I will show you how I turn something like this into something like this, in hopes that you find a great appreciation for jewelry techniques. My beginnings. Now, I started my fascination with jewelry design by going into my grandmother's costume jewelry box, gimcracks, what have you, taking them apart and putting them back together, sometimes in a more unique way. The next step was owning a '66 Volkswagen split window bus. We dropped the engine 5 times in the summer of 1995, thus becoming very familiar with tools. The logical progression? Lost wax metal investment casting, of course. Now, I didn't learn how to do this technique by Googling it. I made myself way over to Florence, Italy, and learned from the masters themselves, Franco and Vincenzo. These are store owners from the famous Ponte Vecchio, which is the Gold Bridge in Florence, if some of you may know. There was a learning curve. I was learning the language at the same time. Unfortunately, the word, for example, to take, as in prenda, as in prenda your bolino, sounded very familiar to me as very similar to Brenda your bolino for about 3 months. I'll use this to go into the process. Brenda your bolino. You start off with a piece of wax, something like this, and find any sort of sharp object, which is how I created this piece. Now with this piece, you connect what is called a sprue. This will eventually become your canal where the silver can go into your piece. After you make a sprue, you attach it to a bottom piece of wax, pretend this is wax, with a trunk of a tree, and you melt a wax tree out of all of your pieces of jewelry that you were wanting to cast. Now with this tree, I'm going to take a cylinder that kind of resembles a soup can. Put the cylinder on top of this tree. There is a base on top of this tree, and fill it with a plaster-like substance called investment. Now, it does contain silica, so make sure you wear your safety mask. The next process takes about 5 to 12 hours. We're going to put our cylinder into a kiln and cook it, which is called the burnout, at 1,000 degrees Fahrenheit for 5 to 12 hours, as I mentioned before. I just want to emphasize that point. Now, here comes the fun part. The next day, imagine I have a big wash bin with a lid on it. This is going to be a centrifugal casting unit with a lid that I'm having to hold. So somehow I have to get the 1,000-degree kiln, out of the 1,000-degree kiln, get my soup can, place what is called a crucible next to the silk can inside of this big wash tub that has an arm on it next to each other. With this arm, I'm going to wind up the arm to create a tension, light up my torch, put my metal into the crucible next to this. I'll put that there. Here's the wash bin again. This is where your third hand comes in, or your friend. In this case, we'll use my hip. We've wound up the wash tub. We're holding this. We're heating our metal, and at the same time, you have to let go, let the torch off, let go of the tin to have the centrifugal force spin it around, thus flinging the metal into the negative space of the soup can. Now, I did miss one very important step. While your soup can is in the kiln, the wax is going to be melting out, of course, 1,000 degrees, thus lost wax. That's where that name comes from. So then after you come back, we'll go back to our metal tree. Your rings will be attached all around in this, in whichever metal you have chosen. Cutting them off, polishing, designing, polishing them, and then you can make a rubber mold with this piece of metal. That is also a vacuum process that takes a couple hours. Inside of this mold, as you see, is where I injected wax into this mold and made another piece of jewelry just the same. Now, casting has a little bit of a negative connotation when I first started the jewelry business because it connotates replica, a duplication, something that's not original. But as I learned more about the process, I found that with this piece, I can also make designs out of wax and change up the designs and make truly unique pieces even with the casting. With this piece itself, I made this whole series. At least the 3 in the middle. There's another piece for the other 2. So in summary, the point of my demonstration today is hopefully to inspire a little bit more appreciation for metal casting business. It is a very, very, very exact process. One quick little story. I one time didn't have my plaster mix quite as I should have, and there was a little bit of bubbles in the bottom of the soup can. When I flung the metals, half of it went out the side. My earrings were supposed to have little flowers on it, and it did create a reaction from Franco. Mamma mia, come è fatta? Come un pomodoro smuffito. Which roughly translates, oh my dear, what did you do? Your earrings look like a tomato rotten. Next time you want to pick out a piece of jewelry for your sweetie or want something special or unique, keep in mind that the national jewelry chains are mainly casted. You can find some nice things there. But if you want something that's truly unique, please visit your local jewelry stores or your favorite custom designer. Thank you.